Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Temkin. I lead the Qualtrics XM Institute, and I am so excited to be part of this year's Congress. The association has done amazing things to help customer experience come to the Spanish marketplace, and I'm so excited that you'll notice that I actually put up a poster on my virtual office. So anyway, I am really excited to be talking to you about the evolution of CX. You can see I have a very long title, and that's because I'm going to be talking about 20 years. Now, I'm here in big screen, but I'm going to go down to small screen and share with you some slides that I have for today's event. And I thought what I would do is start with just a little bit of background about, I said I lead the XM Institute. What is it? We are an organization inside Qualtrics that delivers thought leadership. We're constantly doing research on the state of the art, on best practices, on trends. We're building a community, a global community of experience management professionals, and we do training and certification. So if you want to know anything more, go to xminstitute.com. That's enough for now because, like I said, I have to do a lot in my 30 minutes because I am covering 30 or 20 years of customer experience. Now, if I went through every year, it would take forever. But I do think that this year, 2020, represents the separation between two phases, two very big phases of customer experience. The first, which is the previous decade, was about establishing the discipline, creating the capabilities, the tools, the language, the professionals who mastered and started to master the craft of customer experience. The next decade, I believe, is how we actually start and more profoundly embed those capabilities into our organization. So the previous decade was about the craft of CX. The next decade is about the impact of CX as we focus much more profoundly on how we make changes to our organizations that take into account those skills we built over the last decade. Now, before we start talking about this very large span of time, let's go back to the beginning of this time frame, which is 2010. And just to remind you about what was going on in 2010, Avatar was picked as the movie of the year. Of course, my favorite of the finalists was District 9. I thought it was pretty clever. And if we look at the songs of the year, TikTok by Keisha was the #1 song. My favorite of that list is Hey Soul Sister by Train. And the person of the year, Time Magazine's person of the year, was Mark Zuckerberg. I don't think he'd win it this year. And I hope that you're looking at this going and you're likely going, Bruce, you don't seem to understand anything about our world to be talking about that as what's happened in 2010. Because as I know, and this is all a diversion, what really happened in 2010, the most important thing happened in 2010 was go! Yes, I do know that you won the World Cup, and congratulations. So that's sort of what was happening a decade ago in 2010 in the world. Now I want to talk about sort of what was going on in 2010 in my world. 2010, I believe, was really, you could say that was the start of the CX movement. There were people certainly talking about customer experience and doing some things, but I really think 2010 was about the time where we coalesced a profession. I launched Temkin Group. For those of you who have followed my career and things that I've done, I worked 12 years at Forrester Research, created a lot of the customer experience practice that exists today. And I went out on my own and created a a company that was completely focused on helping organizations transform around customer experience. That was Temkin Group, and for 8 years we were very successful and did a lot of great stuff, but really completely dedicated on the craft of customer experience and on helping organization absorb and get better at it. Also in 2010 was when we started to design the Customer Experience Professionals Association. It launched in 2011, but we were designing it in 2010 because we saw the need for there to be a set of people who not only think about customer experience, not only want to do better things about customer experience, but actually view themselves as customer experience professionals. Because as you know, this is a real profession with real activities that need to be done. So I think 2010, I'm happy to say that I felt like I was at the start of this very important and very successful movement. As all of you know, I'm sure you're all doing great work, and our organizations would not be as good as they are today without a whole bunch of customer experience professionals doing great work. So 2010 kicked off what I called the decade of establishing the discipline. If we go back, right, if we think about what was going on back then, people had different language. There were some people who understood how to do a few things, but the state of the art at the beginning of the decade was really companies doing a single survey of their customers once a year and then presenting that in PowerPoint slides. That was only a decade ago. That's what most organizations did around customer experience. Big survey, lots of questions, one set of PowerPoint slides that they delivered every year. The leaders of the company would look at those PowerPoint slides, and then they would make some decisions about some changes that they wanted to do. They wouldn't actually do it. They'd ignore all of that, and then next year they'd do it again. But what we've learned over this past decade is the value of a customer experience, right? There are very few executives today that would say that customer experience isn't important, right? That's a big change over the last decade, right? A decade ago, executives, you have to force them to even think about it. Now, that doesn't mean that they're particularly good or executives know what to do about it, but I think there's universal understanding of the value of CX. Not that that gets everyone to make the right decisions. The whole notion of voice of the customer programs, that was created over the last decade. Prior to this decade, no one had ever heard of a voice of the customer programs. There were only surveys, right? And the idea of customer journeys is a notion that's happened over the last decade, right? The idea that, it's not necessarily important to look, or it's not as important to look at individual interactions. Like if someone calls into a contact center, yes, it's good that that interaction was met the needs and was easy and satisfied the emotional goals of the end customer. But at the end of the day, what that customer cares about is actually achieving whatever goal they were calling into the contact center for, right? And so as we started to look not at interactions, but at customer journeys, we got a better understanding of what we needed to do to better serve our customers. We also have the rise of experience design. Now, design existed before this decade. As a matter of fact, design started, the real art of design started in the product design world decades ago. I still remember in the 80s when the Kano model came out. That was a key element of product design. And it's also a model that I'm using in experience design today. But the application of that model of design made its way into, I think, e-commerce and internet things first. And then over the last decade, it's become a a sort of standard tool that we use in the field. And then we all thought about employee engagement, the idea that employees are a central component to everything that we need to do in customer experience. So this is all in a decade. That's amazing. We have established the discipline, and there are a lot of people around the world who have expertise in these areas. That is awesome, right? We've done an amazing job in the last 10 years. And that brings us to some of the data that I want to share that's from over the last year on where we sort of are in all of this. This data shows, is from a research of over 1,200 executives. And we asked them to tell us about how they would rate their customer experience compared to competitors. And then we had them explain to us how effective they are, how their business results were over the previous year. And so as you can see, when it comes to, and these are just two measures, both revenue growth and profitability, that the executives that said that they were moderately above average and significantly above average in customer experience were also much better, had better revenue growth and better profitability. And this is one of many pieces of ROI data that we have and we talk about on our site that showcase that companies that do better at customer experience in general outperform their peers in lots of really important business measurements. Now, at the same time, we haven't gone to anywhere near where we need to be in terms of the maturity level of our customer experience efforts. This is the XM Institute has a maturity model, 5-stage customer experience maturity model. And you can see here that over 3/4 of companies, and these are large organizations, are still in the first 2 stages of maturity. Now I think that's wonderful. That means that whatever we've done today, we have a lot of opportunity to mature even further in the future. And I think that the move to this next decade, that maturity is really about embedding capabilities. And last, I'll just say that we did this global survey, and pretty much the focus on customer experience is universal, but it's not the same everywhere. In all countries we looked at, there are more executives who are focusing more than there are that are focusing less on customer experience. But you can see that certainly there are different energy levels around CX around the world. All right, so that brings us to the midpoint of the discussion, and that is 2020, where we are today. This is a tough year. And before I go and talk about observation about this year, I want to this is my graphic, and I'm sending you a virtual hug. It's been a tough year for many of us, for many of you, whether it's because of medical issues, whether it's because of economic issues because of the pandemic, whether it's because of medical issues in your family or having the effects of shutting in. I just want to say that my heart goes out to you, and I'm sending you a virtual hug. All right. What we learned this year as people applied their customer experience efforts in this environment is a lot of really interesting practices. As a matter of fact, I've done research and looked at companies that actually have applied CX successfully. And in this environment, they're doing the things that we have actually recommend that they do anyway. And some of the things that they're doing, we see is they've been adjusting feedback. So instead of just continuing on the same surveys or the same listening posts, they've adjusted those to listen to the things that they need. They've done more pulsing, right? How do we understand when our customers, one financial services organization ended up pulsing customers and finding out that their customers were, and it was a credit card company, were really wondering about what they needed to pay. They had bought flights, they had bought hotels, but they weren't using them. Did they have to pay them? So they adjusted. When they found that, they ended up changing their messaging. And then after a while of pulsing like that, that wasn't the question they had anymore. It became a question of, Are you providing, as a credit card company, we're not using you anymore. Are you providing value? So they change their product offering. This adjusting feedback, listening differently, and spending less time focused on historical metrics, right? The people who did well didn't say, how are we doing against our net promoter score from last year? It's how are we doing in this moment? What are we learning? And then prioritizing for action, making sure that we are acting on what we learned. And I think these lessons of this moment, of the people that were successful, really represent what we're going to be doing in the next decade as we embed capabilities across our organizations. And I talk about embedding 3 capabilities: continuously learn, propagate insights, and rapidly adapt. We're going to continuously learn what the people who we touch, whether they're suppliers, customers, employees, and partners, what are they thinking and feeling? Then we're going to propagate insights. We need to automatically develop automatic insights, right? And get them into the hands of people that can actually do something with it. So we have to get insights in the right form, at the right time, to the right people, so that they can actually act on it. And then ultimately we have to rapidly adapt. We have to build the capabilities to actually take advantage of those insights. Because if you think about it, as we create more and more valuable insights, the organizations that take them in and do something with them, those are the organizations that are going to be best at customer experience. Now, when I think about these 3 capabilities, I think about a shift, because we're doing some of that today. When it comes to continuously learn, I think today we do a lot of static listening. We use the same questions, the same listening posts over and over and over again. That made sense when we started, because the technology didn't support us being able to make all of these changes in who we listen to, when we listen to, how we listen to, what information we go, what operational data we put with what experience data. But the fact is, all of that has gotten better. And so instead of just doing the same thing over and over again as if we're not learning, we're going to move to dynamic instrumentation. And dynamic instrumentation is when our listing posts get adjusted on a regular basis based on what we find and what our priorities are for the business at any moment in time. This requires us really to at least quarterly step back and think, what are we listening for? How should we listen different? What do we want to accomplish in our business? And then how do we adjust all of those listening posts so that we can actually get that insight that we need? Now, when it comes to propagating insights, the most common approach today is repetitive reporting. Whether it's a PowerPoint slide, whether it's a dashboard, whether it's alerts, they tend to be the same things over and over again. And instead of that, what we have to think about is, how do we create actionable intelligence? Now, actionable intelligence means we have to look at the jobs that people are doing and design the insights so that they're automatically created, right? Part of propagating insights is going from manual analysis of data to automatic analysis, right? Using analytics to not use analytics, not people, to find the insights all the time. And then how do we form them in a way that the people who are supposed to use them can meaningfully interpret them, right? Not have them actually dig through a dashboard, but get them the information they need in forms they can use in easier and easier ways. Then the final piece is rapidly adapt. We're going to, today, a lot of things we do are about periodic improvements. How do we prioritize a list of problems that we found and hope that our organizations make improvement? This process of just creating a list of problems and hoping the organization improves is not what the future is going to hold. It actually is way too slow and doesn't take advantage of enough of what we find. What I expect in the future is us to turn into adaptive processes. How do we actually flow the insights we have automatically into things like contact center scripts, so that we're making decisions about how we treat an individual customer based on these insights? I see these insights flowing into the product development cycle so that product managers have really good insights into what segments, like what features of a product, and where should they actually put the investment in the next iteration of things that they do. All of this is about rapidly adapt and putting the insights that we have into ongoing processes. So that's the 2 decades that we're talking about, right? That the previous decade was about establishing the discipline, which we're not done with really getting the discipline perfect, especially as we learn more and more processes and the technology improves and gets better across there. We're going to be able to do more and more. But I think we've gotten to the point where we have the fundamentals of the discipline already in place. The next decade, what I want all of you to be focused on, what I'm going to be focused on, is how do we embed those capabilities, right? How do we actually get the insights we're creating, the design capabilities we've established out of just the hands of the CX professionals, the few people in an organization, and have it actually be embedded in the day-to-day activities of people across the organization. So we're really shifting from the previous decade where we built the craft to the next decade where we drive real substantial impact. So from craft to impact. And of course, we are hoping that during that next decade, that Spain wins, of course, another World Cup. Go! I hope that you enjoy the journey. There's a lot for us to work on, a lot of work to do. And in order for us to collectively succeed, in order for us to drive the world in the direction that we want to get to, it is important that you continue on your path, you get better, and that you focus on embedding the capabilities from the things that you've learned in your organization. I'm really excited about the next decade, even more than I was about the previous decade. So it's going to be fun. I think we're going to have even more impact as a group of professionals than we have even had in the past. So this is great, and it's a great opportunity for all of us. And with that, I just want to say thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be part of this this Congress. The agenda is amazing. I hope you enjoy all of the presentations. And if you want to find out more about the XM Institute, visit us at xminstitute.com. And you see here my email address, my Twitter handle. And with that, let me just say thank you once again. And I hope for you and your families that you stay safe, stay healthy, and stay happy during this difficult time. Thanks again.